Are you looking to get ready, be prepared, and transform your financial future? Then you've come to the right place. This is the Get Ready Money Podcast with Tony Stewart, where Tony has insightful conversations with financial experts who are changing the way we think about money. Catch up on the latest financial trends and hear practical advice from Tony and his expert guests so you can build healthy habits that work. Be empowered with tips for implementing small changes that can have a big impact on your financial future. So sit back and get ready to hear from today's guest.
Welcome to the Get Ready Money Podcast, changing the way we think about money. I'm pleased to be joined today by Chad Holmes. Chad is an author and owner of Formula Wealth. On this episode, we'll be discussing Chad's insights on how we change the way we think about money and creating an inheritance playbook. Chad, welcome to the Get Ready Money Podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Tony, thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, excited to get into this. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your origin story?
My origin story. Well, I grew up as the son of two CPAs, and I liked accounting and enjoyed the classes once I finally got to take them in high school. Went and did the CPA route, joined a Big Four firm as an auditor, and surprise, surprise, I had no passion for the life of being an auditor. And so I realized that it was a great stepping stone into another field, which was personalized financial planning. And an opportunity came up when we moved to Texas for me to change jobs and start over there. I joined this company in Texas, and it was the greatest work experience ever. And in fact, I could have stayed there forever. But my wife she was in residency for become a breast cancer surgeon, and we had to move for her fellowship training, and we had a baby, and it was 2020 and COVID, and move across the country, and a lot of fun things. So why not quit your job, become a stay-at-home dad, and start a business all at once in a state you don't know a single person in, and your neighbors aren't talking to you because of COVID. So it was a fun year. He lied. And what happened was I developed this passion project of I really like serving people in a flexible time. Like some of my clients, I meet nights and weekends because that's all I could do in the beginning, because my wife was gone and I was at home with the baby. And it turns out people really like not having to take off work to meet with their advisor. And so some of my clients, I began meeting with them nights and weekends, and we still continue to meet like that. Others are retired, and it doesn't matter. But anyway, so I created Formula Wealth, and it took a while for me to figure out exactly who I wanted to serve. And it was a couple years ago. I was trying to figure out where do I focus my marketing efforts? What specialization do I want to serve with families? And I was like, I really like working with my family, but that's just kind of weird. I can't just advertise it. Hey, I like working with my family. But I realized it wasn't my family that was so great about those particular clients I was serving. It was the problems that they had, and it's a unique set. And my parents are kind of about retirement age, and their parents are well into their 80s. And although both my parents are CPAs and absolutely brilliant with money, I'm bringing to them ideas to do with their parents that they had never considered before. There's different strategies from a tax, risk, investment standpoint, estate planning standpoint, that when you're looking at financial planning from two generations, it really opens up the opportunities for unique strategies to be implemented. So I'm bringing these really cool strategies. My we're looking at loopholes, and we're figuring out, hey, what can we do proactively so that when my grandparents pass, we minimize probate, we minimize taxes, we minimize the headaches that go along with that burdensome process. And it was just really fun. I was like, these are the problems I like solving. It's stepping back and looking at it 2 or 3 generational lens of financial planning, so that we're not just minimizing taxes for one family set, one client, but we're minimizing taxes and maximizing wealth for the bloodline. We're looking at the legacy. So I wrote the Inheritance Playbook, helping your parents pass the torch, not the tax, because we want to focus on let's maximize that legacy and minimize all of the not fun stuff, all the unnecessary costs and taxes. Um, that come along with losing a loved one and passing assets down to the next generation. So that's a good enough origin story, I think, to get started here.
Well, that's awesome. You said a lot of things, and I think a lot of advisors and people in general have a tough time coming up with their focus or their why or what problems they're actually trying to solve. I mean, so was there a clarifying moment for you where you go, okay, I really, multi-generational planning is the thing that I want to solve?
There was. It was the biggest light bulb I've had in the business. It was trying to figure out, commonly people will try to serve, doctors or high income or retirees or whatever. And I didn't want to get lost in that competition. I wanted to do something unique where I would be the go-to guy for that problem. Um, and I went to a workshop, and at this workshop, that's where I identified what it was that I enjoyed about serving my own parents and grandparents as some of my clients. It wasn't that they were family, it was that the problems they had were really fun puzzles for me. I don't think I slept for a couple days. It just seems like I just, how do I market this? What problems am I solving? And so when we were having our second child in 23, I knew I was going to have to stop working as much to stay at home with the baby and, figure out that whole craziness. And you can't schedule things when you don't know when the due date is. And so I thought, hey, early 23, I'm going to just write some blogs so that the first few months the baby's here, I can at least be publishing, just releasing those blogs that I wrote earlier. So it seems like, hey, he's still active and all that. And I'm telling my mom about this. I'm like, hey, look, check out all these blogs I wrote, kind of deep dives into some of the concept we've done with y'all and your parents. And my mom's like, these aren't blogs. This is a book. You need to make this a book. And I was like, I've never thought about writing a book before. And did some research and how do you write a book and get it published and all that. And so I went that route, and to date, I've sold just over 6,900 copies. So, and over 100 five-star reviews, and so it's done really well. Clearly, it's a subject that people are like, there's no guidance out here for this right now, and that was one of the exciting things was I was Googling, hey, uh, what about what proactive planning can we do for multi-generational stuff? And there was not, I couldn't find anything. And so I was started putting it all together, and you can piecemeal it if you know what to search for on the internet. But I created the Inheritance Playbook to be the one-stop shop of all of the big ideas, and it's told in story format. It's not a tax textbook. It's broken down. Each chapter is a new family is introduced. You got these characters, and they're relatable. And I throw a bunch of sarcasm and humor, and because it's a heavy subject when we talk about losing our parents or aging parents, and I don't want to lose sight of how heavy that can be. But when you're reading a book and trying to learn, and you have all that coming on, I tried to make it a very light, humorous take on, hey, let's illustrate these concepts via story. And gotten a lot of positive feedback from that approach, because now it's not just something that CPAs can read, but something that everyone can read, and don't have to have any knowledge of tax code. I break it down. In fact, the editor I chose was not a financial person at all, because I wanted an editor who had no idea what I was talking about, because I needed her to say, you need to clarify this. You need to break this down more. And it was so helpful that she was able to point out to me when I was talking over her head, because then I was able to really bring it all to a level where everyone can enjoy it.
That's awesome. And I think that's good advice for everybody in the financial services community when you're writing, is to find an editor who doesn't know what you're talking about so that they can put that lens on it to almost translate what we're doing, which is essentially what you did is, as a CPA, so much, but at the same time, with being a CPA is you develop your own language and jargon. And I know that I've struggled with this is that people oftentimes, I'll use a term and that I think everybody knows. And it was just funny yesterday, I mentioned the word fintech to somebody and they're like, what is fintech? And I'm
Yeah.
like, what? It's like,
Well, it's funny, when I was trying to put this book together, I came up with the book title of Tax Efficient Inheritance. And I loved that idea so much that I went and bought the domain name. And I told my wife about it, who brilliant in her own field, not a financial person though. Um, and I said, "Hey, I finally picked a name for my book, Tax Efficient Inheritance." She goes, "What does that mean?" Like she hated it. And I was like, "That's a terrible name if you're trying to market towards non-financial people." I was like, "Oh, I guess I could see that. I need to really put on a different hat here when it comes to, trying to educate and not just talk above people. That's not what we need to do. That's not helpful for anyone."
yeah. And I think that stretches across, for all of us in dealing with our clients and other advisors is that we have to remember like, hey, they may not know some of the terminology we use. And I don't know if you've experienced this in dealing with clients, but sometimes you just get them nodding to everything you say, and you know that they really are not getting anything that you're saying.
Yeah, I learned early on, because it's easy to, if you're kind of in the zone, it's easy to not make eye contact and just, go into these concepts and, because you know what you're talking about, and so you feel smart. But early on in that job I had in Texas, which was so invaluable for me, one of my mentors was like, "Hey, when you were talking, I was watching the client, their eyes were glazed over. They had no idea what you were saying. Next time, pay attention to their face when you're talking and make sure you're stopping periodically to get feedback and make sure what questions do you have? Not do you have questions, but what questions do you have? It's more of an inviting opener of bringing them into the conversation without the assumption of, well, do you even have any questions? Because what I've just explained is so easy. It's almost insulting to say it like that. But what questions do you have? You're assuming they do have questions, and that makes them feel more comfortable bringing out their genuine misunderstandings or curiosity.
Yeah, well, and I think that's golden right there is help your clients be curious,
Hmm.
to ask the questions. And I think we oftentimes forget that if our clients are not really tuned in and not getting it, is so we have to encourage them to be curious and to ask questions and to engage rather than just kind of nod their head. And, maybe they'll go along with our suggestions, but a year down the road, they're going to forget what we talked about. And either there'll be a downturn in the market or a problem with the product we've placed or whatever. And, then you have a client who goes, well, you didn't really tell me about it. And you're like, well, we talked for an hour about it.
Yeah, and you have to tailor these conversations to different types of clients. Some really like, you have an engineer client. Anybody that serves an engineer know that you got to get into the weeds. And you might have some clients that are like, "Hey, I hired you for this. Don't burden me with all this stuff. You take care of it. I don't even, they just trust you blindly." And as a fiduciary, that's a good thing. But it's, you got to make sure you're going deeper when someone wants to go deeper, and you're not when somebody doesn't care about it. Don't just throw that on them. And if they don't care and they're not going to have questions, yeah, it's just not the way to work with people.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I was thinking, financial planners that I work with is, predominantly I consulted to financial planners. And, I had one who had been an actuary before
Mm,
and talk about getting into the detail and
yeah.
the weeds of every single component. But, it's what he needed, to feel comfortable with the situation, while other advisors would be like, okay, just what's the bottom line? You know, tell me what's your recommendation? I can read the, I can get into it if I need to, but I mean, that's why we're hiring somebody to help us understand something, is because we
Exactly.
don't want to get into the weeds. And I think
Exactly.
that's a huge problem in financial services, that we sometimes just want our clients to know everything about everything, and they don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your book and multi-generational planning. Is why is it important for people to actually act now and not wait to have these conversations?
You know, um, Interesting question. I guess technically you don't have to act now. Just do it before something bad happens. Problem is, we don't know when something bad's going to happen. We don't know when we're going to have, or we or our parents are going to have a stroke or become incapacitated for some other reason, um, or pass away. We don't know when these things are going to happen, and you can stay in denial all you want, but it's not going to help anything. You cannot start having these conversations too early. That's not possible. The earlier we can bring about open, honest, transparent communication with our partners or and our parents, um, the better things can go, the more proactive we can be. And if we do things on the front end, it saves tremendous time and money on the back end. I know you had Cameron Huddleston on your show a little while back, and she wrote that great book, Mom and Dad, We Need to Talk, which I even reference in my book. And it's about having those important, necessary conversations with your aging parents. And my book doesn't go into how to have the conversations like Cameron's book does. Mine's more about, hey, once we're all on board, here are the tax, investment, insurance, estate steps we need to take in order to proactively arrange everything in order to minimize taxes, maximize legacies, maximize inheritance, all that. Um, and so having the conversations now early on, it prevents us from being the man, I should have done this back when mom was still able to communicate or whatever. I've got a friend, um, and my friend's mother has told me for a couple years, "Hey, yeah, I need to get with you because my mom, my friend's grandmother, is she's sick and she's got, a lot of money and we just need to kind of get everything sorted out." And because it's a friend, I haven't been pressured into like, yeah, let's sign up now. I just kind of waited for them to drive wanting to sign on as official clients. And then my friend's mother reached out to me about a month ago and said, well, my mom passed and it's a nightmare. And we've got an estranged sister who's coming in to sue the estate. And my brother and sister got in a fight so bad that my sister went to jail over it. And this is an extreme situation and it's tragic and it's real though. Um, and a lot of it has to do, and there was estate documents. There's a trust that there was stuff in place, but we didn't do the proactive communication to make sure everyone's on board, to make sure everything still makes sense. And the estate's being sued now because of the way things were set up. And had my friend's mom come to me earlier and said, we need to do this before it's too late. After someone passes, you don't have a lot of options. You have to settle the estate according to the rules either of your state or of their will or their trust estate documents. Um, but you kind of lose almost all flexibility at that point. Ahead of time, there's so much we could have done, and as I told her, I said, all my tools are gone. I can't pull out, just random things out of my tool belt. The stuff I have is for proactive planning, not for settling estates. I can't help with that, but it's not going to be the value that I bring. Um, the value that I bring as a trusted financial advisor is on the front end, the planning side. And that's why your question of why do we do it now? It's because all of our options are gone if it's too late. And it's sad and tragic, and unfortunately very real for my friend's family. But I hope we're able
Yeah.
to find some answers and help there. But it's not going to be the smooth situation that it could have been.
Definitely, definitely. And I'm glad you mentioned Cameron is her book, and I'll put this in the show notes for everybody watching and listening, is Mom and Dad, We Need to Talk. And I'll link to the conversation I had with Cameron that Chad mentioned, as well as we have an upcoming episode featuring Cameron and a couple other guests where we're going to be talking about Mom and Dad, what's the plan? And it will address these, like, how do you get started having the conversation? Because that's also it can be very uncomfortable to bring up the concept. So people put off having these conversations, uh, even though they're really important because they're hard to start. So, one of the question about this is why should advisors focus on the whole family and take this multi-generational approach? Could they, instead of just talking to one layer at a time, but looking at it as a whole?
Um, what happens when we're not including either our spouse or above or below generation is someone's going to pass away and become incapacitated, and I don't like the term ignorant, but the person who was not involved, um, it's an extra layer of devastation and confusion at a very difficult time. Um, by including everyone in the conversation, there's at least some sense of continuation in the plan and knowledge of what's going on. One of the first chapters in my book is taking an inventory of what your parents have, what they owe. So basically creating a balance sheet. Um, and because, if you didn't know that they had a safe deposit box or a bank account or where their will was, things happen and people have no idea where to start to find the assets to pass them to the next generation. If we don't have that roadmap ahead of time, things could be lost forever. And so by including everyone, um, you know, it's difficult as financial advisors for us to say, hey, I'm glad you're a client, but I also want you to bring in another generation because that seems really greedy. Because most financial
Hmm.
advisors are charging, the 1% AUM or assets under management. So if I'm managing $1 million, 1% is a $10,000 fee. Um, and so to say, hey, bring on that next generation seems greedy, even though it could be very helpful. Because of that, uh, I created my firm and I made it a flat fee, and you can bring your parents on at no cost. Because I never wanted to be accused of, hey, this guy just wants my parents on because he wants more money. It's like, fee doesn't change. Doesn't matter. Bring him on. I'm not getting paid more. I'm going to do more work. But guess what? I'm going to provide tremendous amount more value because um, when we step back and have the variables of your parents' tax bracket and your tax bracket, then we can start solving problems. If I'm not working with both generations, there's too many unknowns. I don't know that there's this, for example, an annuity or an IRA off somewhere else that they never told you about, or whatever it is, that has massive tax effects. And if not considered in the plan, then the plan's beyond useless. It's doing harm because it's making assumptions of, we have a complete picture, but we don't. Um, and so by bringing on both generations, bringing on every person in the group, um, and yes, sometimes it makes sense to bring in all the children as well. That gets a little more complex. So this is really, really ideal for either families where there's a clear financial leader among the siblings, or
Hmm.
only child. That's where you eliminate a lot of the craziness. Um, but regardless of how many children are in that second generation, these ideas need to be considered, and what could make sense for the family unit. Um, but yeah, by if we don't bring in everybody, we can't solve all these extra fun problems. And this is the way I think of them. They're the different puzzles um, that enable us to maximize what's going on to the next generation.
Yeah, well, I think that's so important, is to include the generations in these conversations. And it's far beyond the scope of our conversation, but for advisors who are listening, I hope you're taking away the message about how you're charging fees. A good resource is Michael Kitces, at kitces.com, and his work in talking about setting up compensation systems, because I think that is an issue for the industry, that we haven't really confronted how, we're compensated, and how that can limit clients' desire, as you say, to talk about certain assets, because they're worried that you'll want to, if I say I have an IRA over here, then you're going to want to manage it so you can get your AUM on it. Or, like you mentioned, bringing in your parents is like, well, are you upselling, to get the parents, or are you truly planning? So, that's definitely not something you and I are addressing, but I think advisors should take your words into consideration about how they're uh, being compensated, because I think that is an important part of the conversations we need to have as an industry. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because it is about the multi-generations. And we're seeing that, especially with people living longer, as you have, in your situation with your family, you have four generations
Mhm.
to consider. Obviously, your kids are a little bit young for the conversations, but they are part of the planning consideration. So, let's switch into what I call the Get Ready Money questions. These are questions I ask all my guests, are a little bit more quick fire. Um, the first one is, what basic money concept do you wish people knew?
Yeah, I like this question. My initial thought was something very basic, compound interest and time value of money, just how explosive those can be over time. But I figure I think that is a little more well known than, you know. So what I wanted to say as my answer is the step up in basis that happens when someone passes away. It's not exactly a basic money concept, but it is something that everyone's going to deal with in their life. And the step up in basis basically refers to taxable accounts. So not IRAs or retirement accounts, but if you buy an asset for a certain amount, that you buy it at that's your basis, and then hopefully over time it increases in value. If you were to sell it, you have a capital gain that you realize, and you have to pay taxes on that capital gain. However, if you wait and hold it as part of your estate, you pass away, your heirs inherit that asset. They get a step up in basis to the value on the date of your death, so they can sell it and have zero capital gains. So let's say you bought a house 20 years ago for $100,000. It's now worth $500,000. There's a $400,000 unrealized capital gain there. If you were to sell your house or just gift it to your children, if they sell it, there's long-term capital gains on $400,000 versus holding on to it, letting them inherit it, and now they own a house worth 500,000 with a basis of 500,000. They can sell it, zero capital gains. So I know you said rapid fire, but I had to explain
No,
that because
no,
it's not
that's
exactly
awesome.
common sense.
Well, and I think that is important. And I think that this gets to something that, I'm trying to help spread the word on, is that this is tax planning that anyone can consider. That this is not just tax planning for super wealthy people. The tax planning
Exactly.
is for everyone,
Yes.
and this applies to all of us. So I'm really glad you brought that up. And just as you mentioned, compound interest, that is the number one answer on a show. I feel like maybe like Family Feud. The number one answer
Yeah.
is
It was
compound
so obvious
interest.
that I had to choose something else.
So that's awesome. So thanks for sharing about step up in basis. And for everybody watching and listening, it's just something. to consider. Um, and is that in just in the Inheritance Playbook? Do you cover step up in basis?
I do. It's chapter 5 is taxable accounts, and we go over, and a lot of the examples I use in my book are things that clients or friends or family have told me happened to them, and so you don't have to go far to realize, it's not that people acted with malice or anything to, hey, I'm trying to scoot around the rules. It's just these rules are not commonly known and they're not discussed, and your financial advisor is talking to you about your stuff, and no one's talking about the wealth transfer, which is why I think it's so important that parents and children have the same advisor who knows what they're talking about when it comes to wealth transfers. But the example of step up and basis in the book is a real life example that has happened to a family friend of ours that they messed up on the house and tried to be creative and ended up owing a lot of taxes.
That's a very important point. Is sometimes being a little creative can really backfire instead of just following a simple path.
Mhm.
That you don't have to be creative on everything in the money world.
Yeah,
Is
the idea there was they wanted to avoid probate, so they gifted the house down to the next generation. And yeah, probate's nice to avoid, but not when it causes you to pay tens of thousands of dollars in capital gains taxes because you were gifted a house instead of inheriting a house.
definitely. So with anything you do, is you want to ask questions.
Mhm.
So, Chad, the next question is, what is one simple thing people can do each year to set themselves up for financial success?
I think setting goals each year about investing that have nothing to do with stock market performance. I think if we get too caught up in the market's doing well or market's doing bad, and so we change our plan, um, if we can just focus on controlling what we can control, such as how much we contribute, how aggressively we're investing, how we react to market volatility, and into what types of accounts are we investing? Is it IRA, Roth, after tax, any of that? These are things we can control. And so if that's what we focus on and not pay as much attention to the market, I think people can be better off in the long run because the market is just so much noise. And if we step back, historically speaking, the more you step back and just wait for time to pass, the market has done really well over long periods of time. And there's reasons that, capital market assumptions that go into that. But every single day we expect a positive rate of return. That doesn't always happen, but on average it does. On average, every year goes up. On average, so we step back and understand if we can just fight through the scary years, but stick to the plan, especially contributing during the scary years. That means you're buying things on sale. That the market's down, that's the time to buy. So if we can just tune out the noise and stick to a plan, controlling what we can control, I think that's powerful.
Definitely. Well, as Warren Buffett says, his anticipated holding period is forever, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that says something. Warren Buffett's had a little bit of success in the market. So,
A little bit.
what is one habit that people can change when it comes to their money?
I I struggled with brainstorming on this one. I think the viewpoint that can be changed. I don't know if it's a habit or a viewpoint, but um, a lot of times I'll hear that your financial advisors are too expensive, and so you avoid going to a financial advisor. And um, expensive, it, it's an investment. The relationship with the advisor. And in my personal opinion, it should be one of the best investments you ever make. The value delivered by that relationship should far exceed the expense. If going back to the typical 1% AUM fee, Vanguard did a study about the advisor's alpha, which is what they called, the extra rate of return that the advisor relationship brings to families. And they did a study across many advisors and what's being brought. And Vanguard said the advisor's alpha, the extra value they bring, is about 3% per year. And so if they're charging 1% and bringing 3%, 2% per year extra is huge. I mean, from avoided mistakes, from taking advantage of tax loopholes, from investing wisely and appropriately to your risk tolerance and rebalancing, all these ideas, tax strategies that can be brought into the relationship. For example, $1 million dollars at 7% over 25 years versus $1 million dollars at 9% over 25 years, the ending value, just that 2%, net after fees that the advisor brings, is an extra $3 million dollars almost. I mean, that's huge. So an extra 2% per year, to me, that's an incredible investment. Um, and if you're not feeling that you're getting value from the relationship, first, I think the advisor should fire themselves. That, I have let clients go that said, "Hey, I thought that I could bring value to this, and I did in the beginning, but no longer does that make sense. You have reached a spot where things are too either straightforward or basic or whatever, but my fee doesn't make sense anymore." And so I've let people go, and it's been, we high five, and it's like, "Hey, we brought value, but we're done. You did it. Congratulations. You're moving on. Call me when things get complicated." Um, but there are advisors out there that charge, flat fee for short-term engagement. I used to do that. It was great, but not every advisor's fee schedule makes sense for everybody. I don't do 1%, but some people that makes sense. Some people the commission structure makes sense because of those needs. I mean, there's no right way, in my opinion, to do it. The flat fee makes sense for me and the people that I serve. But if we can get our heads out of the advisor's too expensive, I just can't do it, then people can be better served by finding an advisor who does a fee structure that matches their exact net worth and income and anything that is tailored to them. I promise you, there's somebody out there that would make sense for you.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the thing about hiring a professional is, that we think about that in other fields. We don't hesitate to hire a professional where with our money, we hesitate to hire a professional. And so I think that's really important. Um, what money myth are you trying to break?
Um, our culture says it's taboo to discuss finances. We don't. Finances are super personal, and I think that's devastating families if by not communicating money to our spouses, our parents, our children, we are really missing out on opportunities to not waste that money, to maximize legacies and things like that. I think um, the avoiding talking about money, and it's around either shame or pride or fear of being taken advantage of. There's so many reasons that go into it why we don't talk about finances, but assuming you have trustworthy children or assuming that your parents still have all their cognitive abilities, there are there's so much value to be had with an open, honest, transparent conversation that can bring about a lot of savings.
That's awesome. Awesome. Okay. Well, to wrap up, this is our wrap up question. What is your number one tip on changing the way we think about money?
Uh, I'm just gonna be a broken record here. Uh, not sharing the details of your finances with your loved ones is a guaranteed way to reduce the finances you leave behind. Said differently, we maximize our legacy when we proactively plan together with the next generation.
I love it. We maximize our legacy when we plan together. The next
Proactively.
generation. I'm making a note of that because I think that's so important. And I think that is a wonderful takeaway is communication,
Yeah.
working together, seeing how all the pieces fit together. And that's what financial planners should be doing, is
hmm
helping clients figure out how all the pieces fit together, at least in my view. That's what
Yeah, picking
financial
picking
planners should be doing.
stocks. I think that's what the masses believe financial advisors do is we just pick stocks. I never pick stocks. I don't like doing that. You know, the comprehensive planning and understanding risk and bringing about ideas from insurance and estate and taxes and investments, marrying those all together so that uh, to maximize financial freedom with families is what good financial advisors should be doing with the clients that need that. But yeah, picking stocks is, I mean, that's gambling.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and we're not going to talk about Robinhood. That's another subject as well. So, Chad, where can people learn more about you, pick up a copy of the Inheritance Playbook, and find out about Formula Wealth?
I'll make it real simple for you. Go to formulawealth.com. On my website, there's not only my bio, my fees, my the link to Amazon to buy the book. The book is available on audio, paperback, ebook, and hardcover. So you can get, do Spotify or Audible, any of that stuff. But um, learning about who I serve, how I serve people, it's all on my website, at formulawealth.com. And of course, you could just Google or go to Amazon, type in the Inheritance Playbook. Um, but it's out there in the interwebs. It should be able to be found.
Uh, Awesome. And for everybody watching and listening, there will be links in the show notes too. So if you do go, if you are listening to this, you can go to the show notes and you'll be able to find these links. And related to that, are there any social media channels where you're active?
Yes, I'm trying to be more active, but on YouTube, it's at Formula Wealth, and I think at Formula Wealth is the handle for most of them. LinkedIn, it's Chad Holmes Formula Wealth, but anyway, I've created a couple comedic videos. I'm trying to get better at doing more educational videos, but I did a Ocean's 11 themed video recently of the team talking about how do we get Granny's assets down from one generation to the next without the IRS finding out about it. And so it was just a spoof on the old Ocean's 11 movies where they're coming up with a plan and everybody's just got their own funny banter going on throughout the strategy session. And then I created a character, Sassy St. Peter, on YouTube, um, who is the tax savvy gatekeeper in heaven who mocks the newcomers for the ways they were giving to charity. And basically says, "Oh, well, that was not a tax efficient way to give to charity," is the gist of it. But it's done all in a fun manner to try to be educational but also entertaining.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And for everybody watching and listening, I'll definitely find the link to those videos so you can check them out. I'm going to go check them out. So,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
It's like a
but
minute long.
yeah. So that's awesome. Well, Chad, thanks again for joining us today on the Get Ready Money podcast. Appreciate your time and insights.
Thank you so much, Tony.
Yeah, and thank you everyone as always for tuning in to this episode of the Get Ready Money podcast. If you learned something today to change the way you think about money, please be sure to subscribe and to tell a friend. Until next time, let's change the way we think about money.